into the next slide. So to get right to the chase, $13.6 million. That is what is coming to the Fresno region as part of REAP 2.0. We're going to talk about this further, but that 13.6 is the aggregate amount. What is actually going to be available for distribution will be probably more like 13 million after we deduct for outreach, administration, and program management expenses. But this is the total amount that we'll be receiving. Next slide, please. So REAP 2.0, the $13 million that's coming to the region, is intended to do these 5 things as listed here: infill housing development, reduce vehicle miles traveled, increase the housing supply at all affordability levels, affirmatively further fair housing, and to help implement adopted regional and local plans, specifically the sustainable community strategy, which I know many of you are very familiar with. Next slide. So just a little bit of background. This program was established as part of the 2021 California Comeback Plan under AB 140, and it builds on the earlier REAP 1.0 effort that Fresno COG is also administering for the region and also for the entire San Joaquin Valley. But the difference being that program was primarily focused on housing planning efforts. So REAP 2.0 then expands on that by integrating housing and climate goals and allowing for broader infrastructure investments that support infill development and improve housing supply, choice, and affordability. Next slide. So again, about 13 million that will be distributed, 13.6 in total. About 13 million will be distributed out or sub-allocated. We assume for various projects. This is out of a $510 million statewide pot, with the key term here being transformative or transformational policy outcomes and projects or programs that accelerate regional and local plans and achieve the state's priority planning goals. So again, this is intended primarily to help implement the sustainable community strategy within Fresno COG's regional transportation plan. Thank you. So you've seen these already, but again, a mix of accelerating infill development, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and reducing VMT, with the goal of choosing a portfolio, if you will, of projects that combine all of these efforts. Ideally, they would not focus too much on one of these or the other. Go on. So again, unlike REAP 1.0, REAP 2.0 is administered by 4 different state agencies, whereas REAP 1 was strictly under the aegis of HCD, the Housing and Community Development Department. This time we have HCD in concert with the California Air Resources Board, the Strategic Growth Council, and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, all 4 working cooperatively and collaboratively to help develop the guidelines that we're going to talk about today. Next slide. Okay, so under section 204A of those guidelines, the activities generally include technical assistance, planning, staffing, consultant needs that are program related, administrative costs, outreach engagements, specific eligible uses that we've already kind of touched upon, accelerating infill development, realizing multimodal communities through programs, plans, and implementation actions, shifting travel behavior by reducing driving through programs, ordinances, funds, and other mechanisms, and increasing transit ridership through funding, implementation actions, and planning. So again, kind of big picture stuff here that we will have to weed through to get down to the project or program level. Going forward. Thank you. So technical assistance programs broadly can be interpreted. Technical assistance generally as a category is considered an eligible use, but within our application, we'll have to demonstrate a clear and significant nexus to all of the REAP 2.0 objectives. And they must have, all eligible activities must have a significant geographic or region-wide benefit, and the funds are not intended to fund projects that are relatively small in scope. And that's going to be an important point going forward. Next slide. Thank you. And then we have a big list of ineligible uses, which, again, many of you probably very familiar with. None of these are a huge surprise. We'll give you just a moment to take a look at those because there are more. Next slide, and we'll make this PowerPoint available to you. So again, these are ineligible uses, many of which you've probably encountered before. So for example, operational expenses, nothing associated with parking, and nothing associated with infrastructure that's related to fossil fuels or natural gas, a fossil fuel. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is where it starts getting a little more specific. So all applicants must demonstrate that each proposed use advances all REAP 2.0 program goals and objectives and meets the definition of transformative planning and implementation activity and provides a significant beneficial impact. So that is defined as leading to substantial changes in land use patterns and travel behaviors. In terms of specific metrics, we can look at things like rates of change, such as a percent increase over a baseline, a magnitude of impact relative to variables or targets, a proportion of need achieved, or impact relative to past trends, policies, and practices. So these have to be measurable metrics that we identify within the application that is ultimately funded. So we'll have to spell out the specific projects and whatever sets of metrics that we use that meet these requirements. We will have to be able to state ahead of time as we are identifying the projects to be funded. Next slide. So some of the specific variables that we can consider targets: benefiting households by income group, the RENA process, housing units, density, infrastructure capacity and accessibility, public spaces, community amenities, investments, VMT reduction goals or targets, regional or local equity policies and programs included in any of our, or I should say included in our adopted RTP and SCS, and GHG reduction goals or targets. So the variables, this is just a sampling of the variables that we can consider to be project benefits that we would then have to identify metrics for measuring that benefit. Okay, go on. Thank you. So it's the onus is on Fresno COG through this process to provide clear evidence that demonstrates a nexus between each proposed use and the REAP 2.0 objectives using numeric metrics, targets, outputs, and other units of measurement that can be measured and evaluated as described in the guidelines. And so that's going to be the challenge going forward for us. We have until December 31st to submit our methodology. Next slide, please. And so this kind of talks a little bit about what has occurred to date. The REAP 2.0 guidelines allowed us to submit an initial application for up to 10% of funding for administration, program management, and outreach. We submitted that application for about half that amount, for about $600,000 or 5% of the funds, so that we could preserve as much as possible to distribute to projects and programs. But at this point, we have not heard that that application was approved in the summer, but we still do not have the application. I mean, we still do not have the master funding agreement that would be required for us to receive any funds under this program, which has been caused some consternation because we decided we could not wait any longer to begin this process. The application is due December 31st. We will not have to identify projects at that time, but we will have to have a pretty firm footing on our methodology. And so we expect kind of an iterative process as the result of some of these time delays. Go ahead. So for our stakeholder and public engagement, which is a big component of this process, we are proposing 2 virtual information sessions that we're publicizing with our community partners through regional newsletters, email, social media accounts to help ensure broad representation. There's an additional several meetings after this one, including another meeting of this particular group, in which we will share information. We'll be giving a public presentation, very similar to what you're seeing today, to kind of explain the program in general. And then this is one of the 2 virtual stakeholder focus groups that we're proposing, in which we seek input on program priorities to develop the programs and the methodology for project and program selection. And again, all of this with the intention of being interactive. We do want to hear from you and for you to let us know if we're going in the right directions. We are certainly open and invite our community-based partners to help with this, and there will be funding available at some point for outreach grants to help incentivize and offset CBO expenses for helping us to elicit that public input. And then we will also be putting out a virtual survey through publicinput.com that's targeted community-wide throughout the entire region, with a focus on disadvantaged and historically underserved stakeholders. And again, multiple metrics will be available to determine the market penetration and engagement for that we will be reporting. Go ahead. So this is kind of the timeline that we anticipate under this, kind of a revised timeline from what was originally in the guidelines. We had filed, we actually received notice of our award in September after filing the application back in July. The full application, as I mentioned, due on December 31st. We anticipate revisions to that application and requests for kind of additional detail augmentation in the January, February timeframe. We're hoping that projects will be selected in the March, April timeframe and forwarded to the state partners. And then somewhere in the summer to fall, a master funding agreement in place and work would commence. Go ahead. So this is, we now kind of enter into an area of the lessons that we've learned so far just in filing the state or the initial application, and what some of our brethren and sisters have learned as well throughout the state in doing likewise, and also in conversations with the statewide partners. We do anticipate an extended timeline and deadline revision. So again, the REAP 2.0 guidelines from the state agencies were delivered nearly 6 months behind their initial schedule. Our application, this is actually, I'm sorry, we failed to update this. The application has been approved, our initial application, but again, no word on when a master funding agreement would come forward. I probably ought to explain too that Fresno COG, as primarily a transportation planning agency, we do not have funding available for activities that are included in under REAP very broadly with regard to the specific housing goals and objectives that the state has assigned. So we have to get the funding, at least some of it up front, so that we can have kind of a revolving fund basis at the very least, in order to be able to manage the cash flow for this effort. So we are still awaiting that master funding agreement that would hopefully get this process kickstarted. Next slide. So from what we've been told, the desire is that we focus our attention on a combination of affordable housing and VMT reduction. So that is to say, projects should not lean too far in one direction or the other. Housing versus transportation, they're looking for, again, ideally, a mix of both projects or programs that help achieve both. We've been told that while planning is certainly eligible, several different planning options are eligible activities under REAP 2.0. The idea here generally is implementation as opposed to planning. And also, again, transformational, transformative, these are the key words. So we do have assurances from the partners, the statewide partners, that there would be wide flexibility within the framework of the state goals, and that reviewers are looking for creativity and the biggest bang for the buck. But I did want to call out one comment in particular, that because I know there's been a lot of interest in the concept of gap funding. We have been approached with questions about gap funding, the potential for projects that are already perhaps underway, and whether REAP 2.0 funds, they could qualify for the REAP 2.0 funds. This was a comment that the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments received in its application, which is its full application, which is under review right now, that the call for projects appears to allow for the funding of production of housing units, which is not the intention of this program, which is to fund areas, not individual projects or gap financing, unless some other things can be demonstrated, such as significant beneficial impact. Please add additional clarification to this end and ensure significant beneficial impacts will be achieved. So I did want to throw this in here to kind of clarify that while it is technically possible for individual housing projects to receive REAP 2.0 funding, we anticipate the bar for that to be pretty high, because it would have to demonstrate a regional impact that would again balance the infill housing requirement with the VMT requirement. Go on. Thank you. So for the December 31st application deadline, Fresno COG needs to submit the framework for the guidelines, the methodology, and the proposed metrics it will use for project selection. That's kind of the minimum that we do expect, again, that process to be iterative. We don't expect to get it right the first time, but we do have to submit something by December 31st that attempts to get at this, to address all of these points. So our remaining stakeholder meetings and public meetings will focus on building the consensus that we'll need for the metrics that will be used in developing that methodology, and then eventually the program guidelines. So we do have a series of questions below, but I do want to stop right now for questions, but we do have several questions for you that we're interested in getting your opinions on things. We will open it up. You can either raise your hand, put your comments in the chat box, or is there a Q&A? I guess there's not a Q&A. So if you raise your hand, we can unmute you so that you can ask a question at this point. And then when we get into the questions that we're seeking input on, we'll unmute you to provide your perspective. So at this time, are there any questions about anything that we've talked about so far? Just raise your hand and we'll unmute you. No questions? Wow. Okay. All right, if you all say so. So now we're going to go ahead and go into our Q&A for you. So these are some kind of broad policy level questions that we want to find out what your preferences are, where you think you lean, and that will help inform how we develop the the metrics and the methodology that we will bring back to you for your consideration next month. And so REAP 2.0 allows funds to be used in planning and implementation activities. In your opinion, what blend of transportation planning and implementation would you like to see for the program? Would you like to see transformative planning activities, more capital or implementation activities, or a steady balance between both? And we're happy to take any comments. Just raise your hand and we'll allow you to talk. Okay, well, why don't we do this? We also have these questions in a poll form. So Denise, if you would put up our first question for the poll, maybe people would be more willing to respond in terms of an anonymous poll modality than they would in person. So Denise, if you want to launch the first question. So you should have a poll. And please let us know what your thoughts are on this. And of course, this will all be shared. This is being recorded. Give a couple of minutes for that to flow through. Okay, we're missing about 5 people. So we'll give it just a few more seconds. Okay. I think that's probably good enough. So for the next, so here are your results. 67%, 8 out of 12 who voted say focus more on capital implementation activities, which again, that was kind of the guidance that was given to us informally from our state partners. So if we can go to the next question, and we can just do these by polls if everybody's more comfortable that way. Brenda, there we go. And so next question is, which of the following allowable use categories would you most like to see funded? So do you lean more toward accelerating infill development for the facilities that facilitate rather housing supply choice and affordability, realizing multimodal communities, shifting travel behavior through reduced driving, or increasing transit ridership? If you had to pick one, where would you want to put the money? So Denise, do you have that one up? Okay. All right, we have our 12 out of 17 that responded to the last question. We'll give it a few more seconds. Are there any last minute additions here? Okay, so in this case, we seem to have a fairly broad consensus around accelerating infill development, that is the preferred approach, with realizing multimodal communities coming in second, about half the number of votes, and then increasing transit ridership. All right, thank you very much. The next slide. Among the potential eligible uses for REAP 2.0 funding, choose one or more that you think should be prioritized. Affordable housing development programs that accelerate the supply of long-term affordable housing for low-income and moderate-income households in infill areas, completing environmental clearance to eliminate the need for project-specific review for infill development, establishing a Vision Zero policy and program within a safety plan and a slow streets program, developing bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure plans and other multimodal infrastructure plans and policies, or producing multimodal corridor studies. So go ahead and launch this one. So I believe on this one, we can look at more than one. So we'll just kind of, you may only be able to vote for one, but certainly we can look at more than one in an effort to balance the kinds of projects or programs that are eventually funded. Okay, just a couple more seconds. Okay, so we do have 100% answered. I guess we lost a few people. But again, affordable housing development programs to accelerate infill development or accelerate affordable housing for lower income and moderate income households in infill areas is the number one selection, followed pretty closely by completing environmental clearance and developing bike and pedestrian infrastructure plans. Those have a similar number of votes for each, and then producing multimodal corridor studies, with 2 votes, and establishing a Vision Zero policy and program safety plan. Okay, so that gives us some direction, and again, this will help us in developing what we will eventually be bringing back to you. Oh, I was thinking that was, okay, I'm sorry, there's another question. Among the potential eligible uses, choose one or more that you think should be prioritized. Roadway pricing feasibility, developing and implementing multimodal access plans to and from transit facilities, rezoning and guiding development by updating planning documents, development standards, and zoning ordinances, investing in infrastructure projects and other programs to expand active transportation and implement bicycle and pedestrian plans, funding and implementing parking and transportation demand management programs and ordinances, and planning for additional housing near transit. So still more potential priorities. Go ahead and put the poll for this one up, please. And again, we will be comparing these afterward. The PowerPoint will be made available to you on the website for your consideration. And we're happy to take questions at the end. Give it a few more seconds here. Looking to try and get at least up to the 12 that we've been averaging. We only have 10 votes right now. Okay, so it looks like we have a pretty clear winner on this one in terms of investing in infrastructure projects and other programs to expand active transportation and implement bike and pedestrian plans. So again, that will absolutely be added to the list. We have 4 votes for planning additional housing near transit. We have 3 votes for developing and implementing multimodal access plans to and from transit facilities, and then a vote for studying roadway pricing feasibility. So thank you for all that. I believe that's the end of the questions. Is that correct? And if there are any others that are not included in this list that you would like us to consider, please just raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak. Join the conversation. Here we go. Sophia. Thanks for
Yes.
joining.
Yes. Hello.
Hi,
I wanted to know if the application for these funds would be, who would be the applicant? Would it be COG, and all of the participating jurisdictions need to agree on programs, or would individual jurisdictions apply? Can you say more about that?
what we anticipate, well, first of all, it's not limited to jurisdictions, although we do anticipate that it would probably, as a matter of as a practical matter, it's probably going to be necessary for any community-based organizations, nonprofits, to partner with a local agency. I think that we would certainly prefer it that way. The state guidelines do not require that. In theory, we could be granting directly to an NGO, NPO, although that would probably not be our preference. So we will have to talk about that further. But the projects will eventually have to be listed again with all the metrics, that we anticipate listed out and submitted to the 4 state agencies who will approve the application and ultimately the project. So it's a combination of both. The jurisdictions and any other interests who wish to apply would do so first through the COG with an application that we would produce on a regional basis, and then that application would be sent up the chain to the state agencies who would then give us a thumbs up or thumbs down on the specific projects or ask for more information, what have you, before agreeing to fund. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Thank you.
Absolutely. Are there other questions? Are there any other eligible uses or programs that would meet the objectives that you would like to see in the community, in your community, in the region at large? Okay, seeing none. Next slide. Okay, so our next steps, we will be basically putting, you are a special group, our stakeholders, our valued stakeholders, because you understand a lot of the terms that we've used so fluidly today, terms like infill development and pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. These are not necessarily terms the public understands. We realize that. And so we will be revising these same questions to the best of our ability in layman's terms for a public input poll, whose results will be provided to you at the December 7th meeting. We'll let you know what we found out from the public at large. We will be holding additional public meetings 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, November 16th, excuse me, via Zoom, and then broadcast later on, or broadcast on Yahoo and Facebook, and then posted later afterward. Another one noon on Tuesday, December 13th via Zoom, and then again on December 14th at 5:30 p.m. All of these public sessions in which we'll have interpretation available, and again with kind of a condensed or abridged version of this presentation, distilled down hopefully in a language that is more easily understandable to the general population. This stuff gets pretty technical, pretty wonky. So all public sessions again posted on Fresno COG's Facebook and Yahoo pages, and it will be advertised via social media accounts. Next slide. So that is it from us. Once again, I do want to offer the opportunity for anyone to ask any questions that they may have. Again, the goal here is not at this point to be thinking in terms of project or program level necessarily, but to think in terms of the methodology that will get us to the projects and programs that will eventually be funded. What are the metrics that we should be using? We will be bringing a proposal back to you for consideration. Something that we think will pass muster based on what we've learned so far in our own conversations with the state partners, as well as a roundup of what other MPOs throughout the state are doing with their REAP 2.0 funds. Again, on a unlike REAP 1.0, REAP 2.0 is being handled exclusively by MPOs, as opposed to having us grouped together in any way. For REAP 1, we do have a valley-wide consortium that Fresno COG is serving as fiscal agent. That is not the case for REAP 2.0. We're on our own on this. And so we appreciate any input that you want to provide by all means. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone on staff with your comments, thoughts, questions, and we'll do our best to get them answered very, very quickly. And we appreciate your time today. Are there any last comments or thoughts before we let you go? Okay, seeing no hands. If there are none, then thank you so much for attending. We appreciate your time today, value your partnership and input, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.